My name is Anna, and I am 29 years old. I work as a senior software engineer at a major tech company, a position I earned through years of late nights, self-taught coding, and clawing my way up from nothing. By the time I turned 27, I had become a ghost in my own family's story, present enough that they couldn't forget I existed, but distant enough that they'd stopped expecting anything from me, beyond the occasional polite phone call. And that was exactly how I wanted it. The distance wasn't accidental. It was carefully constructed, deliberately maintained, a protective barrier I'd built brick by brick to keep the toxicity of my childhood from seeping into the life I'd created. Let me be clear. I didn't cut them off completely. That would have raised questions, created drama, possibly triggered my mother's tendency to play the victim. She'd tell everyone who'd listen, conveniently omitting all the years she'd abandoned me emotionally while I was still living under her roof. Instead, I practiced what I came to think of as strategic minimalism. I kept my social media presence virtually non-existent. No Facebook. I'd deleted that my sophomore year of college after my mother kept commenting on my posts about how tired I looked or asking why I wasn't smiling in photos. No Instagram stories showing my life. I had a LinkedIn profile because it was professionally necessary, but it was bare bones. My job title was listed simply as software engineer with no company name, no salary information, no detailed descriptions of my work. When my mother's friends would ask her about me because occasionally someone remembered she had a daughter, she'd have nothing to say except vague platitudes. Oh, Anna's doing fine. She works with computers somewhere out west. We don't talk much. You know how busy young people are these days. The physical distance helped enormously. 8 hours had been good. Moving to Seattle and then to the Bay Area made it even better. Casual visits became impossible. The distance gave me a built-in excuse for missing family events, and the time zone difference meant I could legitimately claim to be asleep or at work when she called. But it was the emotional distance, the careful curation of what information I shared that really protected me. My mother would call every few months, usually when something triggered a fleeting memory that she had another child. The conversations followed the same predictable pattern. Anna, how are you? I feel like we haven't talked in forever. I'm good, Mum. How are you? Oh, busy with Dylan. He's been going through a hard time. And then she'd launch into a 20-minute monologue about whatever crisis Dylan was currently experiencing, losing a job, breaking up with a girlfriend, fighting with roommates, needing money for car repairs. I'd make appropriate sympathetic sounds while answering work emails on my other monitor. Eventually, she'd remember I was on the phone. So what about you? Still doing that computer job? Yep, still working in tech. Are you seeing anyone? Not right now. Work keeps me pretty busy. You work too much. You should try to have more of a social life. Dylan's always out with friends. Maybe you should be more like that. I'd bite my tongue and change the subject. How's work going for you, Mum? And we'd meander through another 10 minutes of small talk before finding an excuse to hang up. These conversations were masterclasses in saying absolutely nothing while appearing to be communicative. I never mentioned promotions, raises, or job changes. I never talked about buying my condo as far as she knew. I rented a small apartment. I never mentioned vacations, though I'd started taking them regularly long weekends in Portland, a week in Japan, a trip to Iceland that had been a dream for years. I shared nothing that would give her a clear picture of my financial situation. This wasn't paranoia. This was pattern recognition. I'd watched my mother's behavior my entire life. I knew exactly what would happen if she discovered I had money. She'd suddenly remember all the things she'd sacrificed to raise me. She'd rewrite history, convince herself that she'd been supportive all along, that my success was somehow thanks to her. And then would come the requests, small at first, just borrowing money for bills or helping Dylan with something temporary that would gradually escalate into expectations and demands. I'd seen her do it to other people. Her own sister, my Aunt Jessica, had made the mistake of mentioning she'd received a small inheritance from their grandmother. Within 6 months, my mother had borrowed nearly $8,000 for various emergencies and hadn't paid back a cent. When Jessica finally put her foot down and asked for repayment, my mother stopped speaking to her and told everyone Jessica was being selfish and cruel. I learned from Jessica's mistake. The only way to protect yourself from my mother's financial vampirism was to make sure she never knew you had anything worth taking. So I became a selective mute about my own life. When I bought my condo, a beautiful 2-bedroom unit with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city, I told no one in my family. When I got promoted to senior engineer, I celebrated alone with a nice dinner and a bottle of wine I'd been saving. When my compensation package pushed me into territory where I was earning more in a year than my mother had probably earned in 5, I kept scrolling through our texts with the same casual, vague responses. Work's good, keeping busy. How's everything there? I built a life that was rich and full and entirely separate from them. I made friends, real friends, people who knew me as Anna the person, not Anna the overlooked daughter or Anna the family disappointment. I dated occasionally, nothing serious, but I learned what it felt like to be someone's priority instead of their afterthought. I discovered hobbies that weren't about survival or advancement. I took cooking classes, started hiking, joined a book club. I created a found family through my professional network and friend groups. My mentor from my first job, Marcus, stayed in touch. We'd get coffee whenever I was in town, and he'd give me career advice. My college professor, Dr. Chen, and I exchanged emails regularly. She'd become a genuine friend who celebrated my victories and commiserated with my frustrations. My co-workers became my social circle. We'd get together for game nights and brunches, and the kind of casual hanging out I'd never had time for in college. These people knew me, they saw me, they valued me, and none of them were related to me by blood. I went home exactly 3 times in the 5 years after college. The first time was for my grandmother's funeral when I was 24. I flew in for 2 days, stayed in a hotel, attended the service, and left. My mother was too busy hosting relatives and playing the grieving daughter to pay much attention to me. Dylan, who was 21 and still living at home, barely acknowledged my existence. The second time was for Dylan's college graduation, the one he'd finally completed after 5 years of changing majors and taking semesters off. My mother had begged me to come, insisted it would mean so much to him, guilted me with, "He's your only brother, Anna." I went for 1 day. I sat through the ceremony, took a few photos. I went to the obligatory family dinner where my mother spent 2 hours talking about how proud she was of Dylan for finally finding his path and how he was going to do such amazing things. I congratulated him. Genuinely, I wasn't angry at Dylan. Not really. He was as much a product of our mother's dysfunction as I was, and left the next morning. The third visit wasn't planned. I'd been visiting Seattle for a work conference and had a day to kill. On impulse, I rented a car and drove the extra hours to my hometown. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I drove past our old house, my mother still lived there, and felt absolutely nothing. I went to my old high school, walked around the campus, tried to summon some nostalgia or bitterness or anything, but mostly just felt like I was looking at someone else's memories. I stopped at the diner where I'd worked in high school. It was under new management, but the layout was the same. I sat in a booth and ordered coffee and felt like a time traveler visiting a past life. A woman about my age came over to refill my cup. "You look familiar," she said, studying my face. "Did you go to Lincoln High?" "Yeah, graduated about 10 years ago." "Me too. Anna." "Anderson? No, wait. Brennan," I supplied. "Anna Brennan." Her face lit up with recognition. "Yes. God, I haven't seen you since graduation. You just disappeared after school. What have you been up to?" And there it was the moment where I had to decide how much to share with someone who was essentially a stranger, who would absolutely report this conversation back through the hometown gossip network. "Oh, I moved away for college, ended up out west, working in tech. How about you?" We chatted for a few minutes about her life, married, 2 kids, working at the diner to make ends meet while her husband drove trucks. Nice enough woman, living a life that could have been mine if things had gone differently. As I left, I realized why I'd made the trip. I needed to remind myself of where I'd come from, to reinforce why I'd worked so hard to get away, to confirm that keeping my distance had been the right choice. It had been I drove back to Seattle that afternoon and never went home again. The strategy worked beautifully for years. I was successful, happy, and free from the drama and dysfunction of my family. They existed in a separate compartment of my life, one I could open occasionally when obligated, then close firmly when the conversation ended. My mother never asked probing questions about my finances because she'd decided years ago that I was just getting by like most young people. She never visited because I'd made it clear I was too busy to host visitors, and my apartment was really small. She never pushed for more information because, fundamentally, she'd never been that interested in my life to begin with. The system was perfect, until it wasn't. The problem with carefully constructed secrets is that they only work as long as everyone plays their part. And I couldn't control what other people posted online, what they said to whom, how information spread through unexpected channels. I'd been so careful about my own digital footprint, but I'd forgotten that I wasn't invisible to everyone else. It started innocently enough. A coworker tagged me in a photo from a company event, one of those fancy tech industry parties with open bars and catered food, held in a venue that screamed money. I was in the background, barely visible, but I was tagged nonetheless. That photo got shared by someone else who worked at my company, someone who happened to be from my hometown. Small world, right? They'd moved away for college like I had, ended up in tech like I had, and had apparently been following my career peripherally through mutual connections. They posted something on their own profile. Wild running into Anna Brennan at the Senior Engineering Summit. Remember when we were in AP Calc together? Look at us now. Number tech life. Number blessed. That post was seen by their cousin, who still lived in my hometown, who was friends with my mother's co-worker, who mentioned it in passing. Hey, didn't you say your boss has a daughter who works in tech? I just saw she's a senior engineer at major tech company. That's pretty impressive. That co-worker mentioned it to my mother during their lunch break. And just like that, the careful wall I'd built came crashing down. My phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in a meeting, so it went to voicemail. Then it rang again, and again. Then texts started coming through. Anna, call me when you can. Anna, I need to talk to you about something. Anna, call me now. I excused myself from the meeting and called her back, my stomach already knotting with dread. Anna. Her voice had a manic quality I recognized from childhood, that brittle cheerfulness that meant she wanted something. Why didn't you tell me you're working at company name? Linda at work just told me. Her niece saw you at some fancy event. A senior engineer. Anna, that's wonderful. My blood ran cold. It's not that big a deal, Mum. Just a job. Just a job? Anna, don't be modest. I looked it up. Do you know what senior engineers at places like that make? I had no idea you were doing so well. Why didn't you tell us? Because of this, I thought. Because of exactly this moment, this tone in your voice, this sudden interest in my life now that you know there might be money involved. I don't really like to talk about work stuff, I said carefully. How did this even come up? Well, Linda mentioned it, and I was curious, so I looked at your LinkedIn. And Anna, you've been at that company for years, and before that you were at other big companies. Why have you been hiding this from us? I hadn't been hiding it. I'd been protecting it, protecting myself. I haven't been hiding anything. You never really asked about work details. Well, I'm asking now. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. We should celebrate. Why don't you come home for a visit? Bring Dylan. Make it a family thing. Or actually, even better. Here it comes, I thought. Why don't I come visit you? I've never seen where you live. I could bring Dylan. He'd love to see California. When's good for you? Mom, I'm really busy with work. Maybe another time. Nonsense. You can take a day off. You must have vacation time, right? Actually, speaking of which, I'm so glad I found out about this. I've been meaning to talk to you about something. Dylan's been having a hard time financially. His car broke down, and the repairs are expensive, and I've been helping him out, but it's been tough. Now that I know you're doing so well, maybe you could help your brother out. Just a loan, of course. He'd pay you back. There it was. Less than 5 minutes after discovering I had money, she was already asking for it. Not for herself, of course. Never for herself directly. It was always for Dylan, for family, for emergencies that somehow only I was expected to solve now that she knew I could. I'll have to think about it, I said, keeping my voice neutral. I need to get back to work, Mum. Of course, of course. But Anna, we should really talk about this more. Maybe this weekend? I have some ideas about how you could help the family out. You've always been so independent and successful. It's time to give back a little, don't you think? I ended the call as quickly as I could and sat in an empty conference room, my hands shaking. 5 years. 5 years of careful distance, of protecting my peace, of building a life free from their chaos and demands. Destroyed in one accidental photo tag and a gossipy co-worker. I knew what was coming. This wasn't the end of the conversation, it was the beginning. My mother had caught the scent of money and she wouldn't let go. The calls would increase. The requests would escalate. Dylan would suddenly remember he had a sister who could solve all his problems. And if I said no when I said no, I'd be the villain. The selfish daughter who forgot where she came from. The ungrateful child who refused to help her struggling family despite having so much. That night, I sat in my condo, my beautiful, hard-earned condo, and looked at my phone. 3 more missed calls from my mother. A text from Dylan. Hey sis, heard you're doing really well. Happy for you. Mum said you might be able to help me out with something. I poured myself a glass of wine and stood by my floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city lights. I'd worked so hard to get here. I'd sacrificed, struggled, built something from nothing while they'd done nothing but take and expect and demand. And now they wanted a piece of it. The question wasn't whether they'd show up asking for money. The question was how much they'd ask for and what I'd do when they did. I didn't have to wait long for the answer.